Space, the current frontier. These are the hosts of the podcast Mind the Gap. Its continuing mission to uncover strange new topics, to seek out new trivia and dispel myths, to correct what many have gotten wrong before.
You're listening to the Mind the Gap podcast, bridging the gap between your minds and everything else. I'm Keegan Gwydolyn.
And I'm Mackie Drew.
And our show today is called The Current Frontier, and this is our show about astronomy myths.
Keep in mind, it's astronomy myths and not astronomy. That's a mistake I made.
Yes, indeed. You see, space is a highly romanticized place. Poems, stories, and even entire genres are written about space. But with all this art come many myths. So today we're going to dispel some of the more common myths about astronomy. Mackie, what's our first myth?
Well, our first myth is about the dark side of the moon, which is super common. I believe this up until a few years ago, you know. The idea that there's one side of the moon where there's never any light, and that's the side that faces away from Earth. And that's not the case. It's just what they mean when they say dark side of the moon is really not dark referring to light, but dark referring to we don't know on what's on the other side.
Yeah, like we don't see it.
Exactly. The idea is that the moon is actually tidally locked with the Earth. So what that means is you've heard the moon pulls on the tides, right? And that's what makes a big portion of what makes the tides. But for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So the tides are actually also pulling on the moon. So when the tides pull on the moon, it basically aligns the orbits. So what you'll have is the moon always the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth.
Yeah. So it's not just the tides, obviously. It's the gravity of the entire Earth that's pulling on the moon.
Indeed, yeah.
And in fact, it sort of stretches the moon, if I remember correctly, into sort of a more oblong shape,
like an egg, exactly. So yeah. it's elongated on one portion. But yeah, so that's the idea. So we can, for a very long time, we had no idea what was on the other side of the moon. It could have been a giant purple rabbit. We don't know. But we found out in 1959, the Russian-made probe called Luna 3 took an image of it. And it turned out that it was very like pitted. It's got a lot of craters on it. It's got a lot less Maria, which are like sea-like areas. They're like
they're like the darker spots.
Exactly. So yeah, you know when you see those big splotches on the surface of the moon, those are the Maria. It's got like 1% of the surface is covered with that, as opposed to the 32% of the nearer side.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not terribly exciting, but there's a lot of myths around it. There's a lot of
well, it's just weird to think about, you know, the moon being something that's so close to us and something that we're also familiar with, and yet we only ever see one side of it.
Yeah, actually, we see up to 59% of it, which is interesting, because the moon jitters. There's different parts of the Earth where you can get a little bit of a different side of the moon, or the backside of the moon, right? So you can see a little bit more than half, which is interesting, but yeah, most of it is a mystery to us. So yeah, no one's ever walked on the dark side of the moon, even though it would be just as fine as walking on the front side. You know, it's not any darker. You get a relatively the same amount of light.
Right. And that's because of like the phases of the moon, right? It's like
exactly.
when there's a new moon for us, it means that the other side of the moon that we don't see is getting full sunlight.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. So you're seeing the phases of the moon themselves should have been a huge key indicator, you know, for everybody to know where's the rest of the light. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's got some good potential though. for future missions. In 2006, NASA announced plans for manned mission to the backside of the moon, and since then it has been canceled. Another mission has been proposed, and it has also been canceled. Budget cuts. Lovely. Exactly. So that's not great. But there is some great potential for maybe a SETI search, or maybe some other good equipment to put on the backside of the moon. Since it is a huge moon between the Earth and the backside of the moon, we've got... that's a great place to put a radio telescope, because you're not getting any interference from Earth, right? The Earth is constantly sending out, like football games.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, so you get this huge block, and only information coming from outside of the Earth will be getting there. So you cut out all of the radio.
That's so good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so smart.
I thought so. Yeah, it's got some problems though. You can't relay information back, obviously, because it's blocking all radio transmission.
Yeah.
The idea would be to actually add a satellite or...
like a relay station
exactly.
or something.
Yeah. It's very susceptible to like radiation and solar flares and moon dust. So like it can get into everything and whatnot. Yeah.
What's that stuff called? Regolith, right?
Regolith?
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a name.
Yeah, moon dust is called regolith, I think.
Oh, that's a cool name. Sounds like from a fantasy novel.
Yeah. Apparently it is awful stuff, though.
Oh, yeah, no, it ruins a lot of things. They have to take a lot of care with the regolith. Mm-hmm. And something somebody else proposed, a disc-shaped, we heard about all those craters. There's a bunch of disc-shaped things already on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So we could just put a radio telescope there, basically code it and then go. And it's so super easy, but it does have its problems. There's also a huge helium 3 concentration. Yeah. So that's like a heavier version of helium, and that can be used in lots of reactors. So
and that's sort of part of the premise of the movie Moon. There's a guy harvesting helium-3 off the lunar surface.
I had no idea there was a movie called Moon. But yeah, let me get through a couple of extra points. There's some conspiracy theories about the dark side of the moon. There's the idea that the Apollo astronauts saw flying alien spacecrafts on the far side of the moon, and they were told not to say anything about it. Not the case. Never been any evidence for it. And others claim that there's an alien base there where aliens live, and they call that base Luna. I have no idea how they would name that, or they'd know the name of that. But yeah, I'm going to list the proof for this right now. There you go. There's no backup. It's just people said it one time.
Okay.
Yeah, and NASA claims these are just made up as well. They're just hoaxes.
Cool. So, are we going to start calling this the backside of the moon?
I'm going to say the far side. That's where you mostly find it. I like the backside of the moon. That sounds a little bit more casual to me. But the far side of the moon is the way to go. Far side of the moon is the
I guess it's more
term.
correct.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I'd like to move on to my next topic, if I may, which is about black holes. Because there's a common misconception that black holes are like giant vacuum cleaners, basically cosmic vacuum cleaners, and they just suck up everything that exists in space, and they're just moving through space and obliterating everything. But this really just isn't the case. But to understand how black holes really work, we need to talk about how they're formed and how gravity works.
I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but there's another kind of myth. Black holes aren't holes.
Oh, yeah.
They're spheres. So
yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah, just a thought. Carry
on. So we'll talk about gravity first. So gravity is an attractive force exerted by all matter upon all other matter in the universe. And the amount of gravitational pull an object has depends upon its mass. For instance, if like a larger object exerts a greater pull than a smaller object would. And
I have a correction.
Okay.
It's not about mass, it's about momentum.
Explain.
Gravity doesn't act on mass. That's why you can still affect light with gravity. It doesn't have any mass, but it does have momentum. It's going fast, right?
Ah.
So, carry on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Small point, you would
Yeah.
it would never come up other than here. So
Right.
don't worry about it.
So, when you see Newton's gravitational equations, at least, he refers to mass.
Yeah. That was, with a poorer understanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it depends on mass or momentum, and its distance from other objects. So further away an object is, the less force is felt. So in all stars, including our sun, the inward pull of gravity upon, the outer layers of the sun towards the inner layers of the sun, this inward pull is balanced by outward pressure of the fusion reaction that powers the star. But when the star runs out of this fuel, the force that's supporting the gravitational force and keeping the star at a set diameter, that force stops. And your star will then collapse under gravitational pressure. There are a couple of interesting ways that this can go. With a star like our sun, it will eventually collapse under gravitational pressure when the fusion pressure abates, and our star will become a white dwarf, which is supported by a force called electron degeneracy pressure.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Sounds very exciting.
It's complicated and quantum-y, so we don't really have to worry about it. But the other alternative is when a large star, I'm talking about maybe 10 times the mass of our sun or greater, when a star that large runs out of fuel and collapses, this degeneracy pressure, this electron degeneracy pressure, is not enough to support the star against the inward pull of its own gravity, and it becomes a black hole. And this is essentially an infinitely small point in space with a very high mass. It's essentially like dividing by zero. You've got a lot of mass in a very, very, very tiny, tiny point of space. Basically, one point in physics terms. And the reason it is black is because it's now small enough that an area exists with such strong gravity that light, which travels at a fixed speed, can't escape. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that we have to understand about this is that its mass hasn't changed. All that's changed about the star between when it was active and when it's a black hole is its diameter.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's
so,
not terribly exciting. I want them to bring me to other universes, and I want them to power my spacecrafts.
Right. But so the mass is exactly the same, which means that the gravity exerted by this object is exactly the same. So, for instance, if our sun was replaced with a black hole of equal mass, we would just continue orbiting around. We would not get sucked into the black hole. Mercury would not get sucked into the black hole. Everything would stay the same because there is the exact same amount of gravitational force acting upon us.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the only difference is that the object has shrunken enough that it has gotten smaller in diameter than its what's called a Schwarzschild radius, which is where the point at which the gravity is so strong that light can't escape. And every object has a Schwarzschild radius, and it's just a matter of compressing that object to smaller than its Schwarzschild radius, and then it becomes a black hole.
Oh, well, so what you're saying is the LHC is going to kill everyone.
Yeah, that's basically the gist of what I'm saying. Yeah.
All right, well, that's great. I'm glad we cleared that up.
Cool.
But I think I want to talk about, very briefly, because it's not terribly interesting, as much as you seem to think so, the reason for the seasons.
See, I like this because it's a very common misconception. I've asked...
That's the thing, though. I didn't know this was a common misconception. But I actually have a correction for you. The idea is that the seasons, the myth is that the seasons are caused by how far the Earth is from the sun at different times of the year, right? It maybe has an elliptical orbit, and then moves further from the sun, and you get less sunlight. What's really caused by is axial tilt. So when you look at it like a globe, it's always on this angle, right?
Right.
And that's the angle at which the Earth is actually rotating around the sun. So it's spinning on its own axis at that weird 23-degree angle, right?
Yep.
And that tilt there means that at different times of year, the surface of the Earth is slightly further or nearer to the sun. The sun is actually not nearer, sorry. It's at a different angle. So when the sun hits it, it's coming in at a much larger angle. So you'd be having the light distributed across a further area, and you'd be having less heat generated because of this. That's why in like temperate areas, just below the poles and above the tropics of Capricorn and whatnot, there is a seasons. There's there's winter and then there's summer. It's hot and cold. And in the southern hemisphere, which would make sense with the axial tilt, when one side is far away and one side is nearer, so you have reversed. So in Australia, in December, you have, it's hotter, not colder.
And it's not really to do with distance as much as it is the
angle at which the light is approaching.
Yeah, the distribution of the light. It's like you have the same amount of light, but it's being spread over a larger area. It's kind of like you only have so much jam. How much toast can you spread it across?
That's the worst analogy. Is that even an analogy? Get out of here.
I just made it up now. I think it's pretty good. I can tell.
It's really well worked. But yeah, between the tropics, there's so little variance that you have a wet and dry season, which you've probably heard about too. It's not winter, summer. It's wet and dry. And that has to do with the movement of weather systems rather than the sun. It has less to do with the.
It doesn't really have to do with anything to do with the cosmic.
Well, we can't say that, but they're informed more indirectly.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so you came to me with this to look up, and I said, oh, okay, I'll look that up, and I found something. The elliptical orbit of the Earth, the fact that it isn't a perfect circle, does account for some seasonal change. So you were wrong.
Well, what I heard is that the northern hemisphere is actually closer to the sun in our winter due to the elliptical orbit than it is in the summer. I see. So I mean, it's
that's fair.
Sort of what you might call it.
Yeah, I'm just being mean. Don't worry. I don't think you're wrong. But it accounts for about 7% of the yearly temperature fluctuations.
I wonder how they calculate that.
Oh, well, I don't know. There's some smart meteorologists out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the axial tilt is obviously the main reason for all of this. But yeah, that's about it. That's why we have seasons.
Cool. So now I'd like to talk about another very, very common myth that I've heard. A YouTuber, Veritasium, has done a video on this, and I've asked people who were in university, in, like upper year science university classes, and they got this wrong. And this myth is that there's no gravity in space.
It's such a misleading question.
I know.
I honestly don't know if it's fair to ask people that. Because when people hear gravity, they think the effects of gravity. They don't think about gravity.
Yeah. And that's really the distinction that we should make. Because, well, I guess the biggest manifestation of gravity that we are familiar with is the feeling of weight versus weightlessness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you really are in space. It's not that there's no gravity, it's that you are weightless. It's the same as if you were in an elevator and the cable suddenly snapped. While you and the elevator are falling, you're feeling there is gravity acting upon you, but you're not feeling its effects because you are weightless. At the time, you and your frame of reference are falling at the same rate. So there's a difference between mass and weight, which is a little bit elaborate, but basically weight is the effect of mass dependent on gravity.
Momentum.
Yes, fine.
Sorry, I'll leave it alone. Carry on.
So there's obviously, as we discussed, a little bit earlier in the black hole part of in the black hole myth, there is gravity exerted by all matter in the universe. and which permeates space far across space. So there's obviously still gravity in space. That's what keeps, the Earth orbiting the sun. What you're missing, however, is the feeling of weight when you're in space.
Yes,
and that's
still have
because
mass as well.
Yes,
and mass is how much stuff you're made of, and weight is the effect of that, of the mass with gravity momentum.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what happens when, say, an astronaut is in orbit around the Earth is they're actually falling, but they have enough, so they're falling back to Earth, but they have enough sideways speed, that as they're falling, the surface of the Earth is curving away from them. And that means that they're stuck in basically a continual free fall around the Earth because, gravity is not just one direction, it's towards the center of mass, towards the center of the Earth, say.
Exactly. It's like you took a person, you threw them in a cannon, and that cannon was so powerful, you shot them into space. But just enough speed that they've now, like when you normally shoot a person out of a cannon, like you do that all the time, they'd fall to Earth eventually, but they're still curving around the Earth, right?
Yep.
But with this, the speed is matched up with exactly how quickly you're falling. So rather than fall or fly away, you do nothing.
Exactly. And so, gravity also exists in deep space. Again, you're just far from any centers of mass, so you're not really falling towards anything. Gravitational effects are minimal, but gravity still exists. You are still drawn towards other centers of mass in space. So, just to put this into a little bit of perspective and I guess provide some proofs, as I mentioned, if gravity didn't exist in space, then the Earth would fall out of orbit around the sun. Earth would just fly off in one direction. The moon would fly off in another direction because, the moon is gravitationally locked to both the Earth and the sun. And the space station would fly out of orbit as well. Basically, gravity is the most important force on the cosmic scale, and if it didn't exist in space, if it didn't permeate through space for whatever reason, then essentially the entire cosmos would fall apart. I mean, galaxies would just, all the constituents of a galaxy would fly away, all the constituents of a solar system would fly away, universe would be finished.
You could, if you had like a spacecraft, you could live though. You'd be fine. Like if you had like a self-sustaining spacecraft.
Well, yeah. I mean, Earth could theoretically survive if we could find the energy. It would be the equivalent of the sun going out.
Yeah, and you would want to like tie everything up. Because the Earth's moving fast, right? We'd fly off.
That's true.
But yeah, so is that all you've got on the
yeah?
gravity in space?
I think that about ties it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk about another big myth, and this is something I toted as a great factoid, which is a distinction from a fact. It's an untrue fact. A factoid from my childhood, which is the only thing you can see from space.
Hang on, is a factoid really an untrue fact?
Yeah, I know. I found that when I was looking up this
That's
stuff.
Awesome.
Up. Yeah. So a factoid, like a fact, but not, right?
Huh.
Void. So, that's an interesting fact. So you can see, the idea is you can see the Great Wall of China from space. You cannot see the Great Wall of China from space, at least not with your eyes. You'd have to use a telescope. But yeah, this has been toted for a long time. It's been consistently debunked. I don't know where it started. I tried to find the origins, but it's so hard with some of these prolific myths.
I heard that it was an astronaut who just sort of anecdotally said he could see the Great Wall of China, but it turned out to be a river of some kind that he was actually seeing.
I saw nothing about that, and I was deep into these myths. Maybe that's true, but maybe it's also not very widely known.
Maybe it's a factoid.
Maybe it is a factoid. It's super ingrained in pop culture, though. You'll hear it in movies, and you'll cringe, and you'll be like, why didn't they do their research?
Why don't they listen to this podcast?
But yeah, you'd need 8 times visual acuity before of a normal human before you could actually see the Great Wall of China. 20/20 is normal vision, right? But 22 is what you'd like 20/2 is
Right.
what you need to be able to see it from low Earth orbit where the space station is.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there
because that's a hard distinction when space begins. Like that's not
Oh,
clearly
it's
defined
so
either.
stupid. I can't find. There's no good information. Everybody's saying something different. Nobody's
Yeah.
quite sure because we are in space now is the problem. Nobody accepts that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some structures that you can see from space though. Large cities, for instance, especially at night, like you
Yeah.
can see the lights of
Yep.
the world.
Makes sense.
So you maybe not individual structures, but some say that the Parliament building in Romania is visible from space.
Huh.
Several astronauts have said this, and it's the world's largest administrative building.
The proud Romanian government.
The proud Romanian people. But yeah, it's about a quarter kilometer squared, so a quarter kilometer each direction. So
Yeah.
it's pretty big.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can
Far
also
bigger than the Great Wall of China is, say, wide, for example.
Sorry?
Far bigger than the Great Wall of China is wide.
Exactly. That's the big issue. It's a huge structure, but it's not wide. It's not visible.
It's large in one dimension.
Exactly. And you can also see some other effects that humans make that aren't like necessarily intentional. The Deepwater Horizon spill in April 2010
Right.
was visible from space. In fact, they use satellites to track like the spread of these sort of things and measure how bad these spills are.
Right.
In summer 2012-2013 in Australia, notice that it spans 2 years there. That's because in Australia the summer is in the winter. Yeah, see that? Tying it back. So, yeah, you could see the bushfires. There was wild bushfires there, huge bushfires, and you were able to see that from space. And you can also see sewage pouring into the ocean. It's a very different color, so you can see this huge, And you can also see huge algae blooms. So that's when you get too much phosphorus in water, then you can get huge booms of algae, and they just destroy the ecosystem because they eat everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some things you can see from space. So I mean, like the Great Wall of China, not only can you not see it, but it's not the only thing you can see. It's wrong on both counts. Anyway, that's all I got for that one.
Sounds good. All right. So the last myth we're going to talk about today is one that I get angry at every single time I hear it. Every single time.
I don't care so much that I'm going to tune out. Goodbye.
And the myth I'm going to talk about is the supermoon myth. And this is the myth that, people always say that, during certain lunar cycles, the moon is going to be like so much bigger than it ever was before and so much brighter and all this stuff. So let's go through the history a little bit and the pseudo reasoning that they use. So the moon's orbit is not perfectly circular around the Earth. There are points at which the moon is closer to the Earth, and this point is called the perigee, and points at which it is further away from the Earth, which is called the apogee.
So the supermoon and the non-supermoon, right?
Not quite.
All right.
There's also the well-known lunar cycle, where the moon is progressively shadowed by the Earth at night, moving from a full moon through a waxing gibbous, first quarter, waxing crescent, new moon, waning crescent, third quarter, waning gibbous, before returning to a full moon, right? That's what you see at night when you see the different parts of the moon lit up. These cycles are out of sync, but every 14 lunar cycles, that is, full moon cycles, you get a full moon, which is also at its perigee. So that's when the full moon is simultaneously, like you get the full moon and it's at its closest point to the Earth. And people call this the supermoon because it is the largest full moon possible to see, basically.
Yeah.
So
it's astounding.
Yeah. People claim that this moon is extremely visibly large and bright. Yeah. Much larger and brighter than usual, and the internet is always plagued with photos people have taken showing the, quote, beauty of the enormous supermoon. And I see this on Facebook all the time, like, oh, pictures of the supermoon, look at how big and better it is. However, in actuality, the moon is not visibly larger. while it is, yes, 14% closer at its perigee than it is at its apogee, it's only 5% closer than average, which translates to an apparent size difference of 5 arc minutes. And an arc minute is a way of dividing up the sky. So if you look at the sky, if you were to look from one end of the horizon to the other, you've looked through 180 degrees. And you divide up each one of those degrees into 60, and you get arc minutes. So
wow, each one of the 180 degrees.
Yes.
Jesus.
So 5 arc minutes is the equivalent of 1/4320th of the sky. So that's the size difference at its greatest.
What a reasonable number to get our head around.
But
I'm
on
glad
average,
you made it like that.
on average, the size difference is less than 3 arc minutes, which is 1/7200th of the sky. So that's 1/7200 is the difference.
Yeah.
Between the supermoon and the average full moon. So this difference is basically undetectable, especially with nothing else in the sky to compare the size to. You might be able to tell the difference if, the supermoon were in the sky beside an average-sized moon. But when they're not in the same sky at the same time, then they're indistinguishable from each other.
We should send a ruler into orbit.
Right beside the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
People claim that the moon is people who claim that the moon is markedly larger may be suffering from a placebo effect type phenomenon. They report a larger moon because they expect it to be larger because, they know it's the supermoon.
That's a great way to test this. Let's just pretend there's a supermoon.
Yeah, it's true. But the other thing that may be going on is what's called the moon illusion. And this is an optical illusion.
Oh, I'm so glad you talked about this. I was about to chime in. All right, carry on.
This is an optical illusion in which the moon appears larger when it's nearer to the horizon than when it does when it's high in the sky. And a similar effect has been reported with the sun and constellations. Say the opening of The Lion King, when you see the enormous sun on the horizon bursting off in the sunrise. So this applies to basically everything. And the explanation is unknown, but there's a couple of hypotheses. One of them is the angular/physical size hypothesis, which basically says that the perceived angular and physical size seem greater, which is just, they don't know why. This is just how your brain is interpreting it. And there's also the relative size hypothesis, which means that you perceive the size of the object is greater because objects on the horizon basically look comparatively smaller. They have fine details, and they're smaller compared to, say, the moon, which makes it look larger, as opposed to when the moon is way up in the sky against no background, really, and you can't really see anything. So those are the two, I
think they're great. Yeah, no,
I think that this is really, it's a relative size hypothesis. I like that, and I think this is why people think the supermoon is so big and stuff like that. And moreover, this illusion has been reported for thousands of years. You hear, I think it was Aristotle wrote something like, oh, even the astronomers don't understand why the moon looks bigger on the horizon than it does when it's up in the sky.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I hope I have put the supermoon myth to bed here.
Nope, we'll hear it next 14 lunar cycles.
Yeah, unfortunately.
All right.
But anyway, with that, I say we should move on to our game section. What do you think?
Sounds good to me. All right, welcome to the game section. So, Keegan, what's your thoughts on the demotion of Pluto so many decades ago?
This was actually, in 2006?
I don't know. Something too long for us to be talking about it now.
Well, people still... I think everyone who doesn't know the reasoning and is not studied up in astronomy even a little bit is, adamantly angry that they now have to remember that Pluto's not a planet. I'm totally on board, though.
I'm on board too. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's the one who made the call. He definitely deserved to make the call, and there was a lot of people being very upset about it. So we're going to be going into the 5-minute challenge now. So what that is every week one of us challenges the other to learn about something in 5 minutes. So they may get something wrong, but we'll be there. We've studied the subject. We'll be there to correct them if they've messed anything up. So last week, I challenged Keegan to learn as much as he could about mahogany on a whim. I hadn't thought ahead at all, and it was okay, I guess. So what did you learn, Keegan?
All right, I did my research on August 6th between 11:40 and 11:45 a.m. So mahogany, this is a tropical hardwood, which is noted for being very beautiful and also very durable. It has a straight, fine, even grain, and it's free of voids and pockets, and its reddish-brown color darkens over time, and is widely used for furniture and instruments because it grows very large, which means that you can cut large boards as opposed to, having thinner trees where you can only get a certain thickness of boards. So that makes it very useful for building say like large pieces of furniture or say, a grand piano. It's used for boats because it resists wood rot very well, apparently.
See, I didn't get that far.
yeah.
So,
and it's mahogany is actually comprised of 3 species of a tree in the genus Swietenia. Swietenia.
Who wants to bet you're saying that wrong?
Swietenia. That's how I'm going to say it. All right. The first is the Honduran or big leaf mahogany, which is Swietenia macrophylla, and it's the only true species that's grown today, and it's the most widespread.
Indeed.
The second is the West Indian or Cuban, which is Swietenia mahagoni. Yeah. Formerly dominant, but it stopped since World War II and is now an endangered species. It was used so much that it became endangered, and they had to stop using it.
I must have it.
Yeah. And finally, there's Swietenia humilis, which is a small and twisted plant which has limited commercial use, and there's speculation that this is actually just a sort of genetic aberration or offshoot of the macrophylla, the Honduran species.
Yeah, okay, well that's pretty good. Is that all you got?
Yeah, that's all I got.
That was very good, very thorough. I got a couple fun facts. Mahogany is the national tree of the Dominican Republic and Belize. And Belize
is Honduras.
Yeah, and Belize's national motto is "Under the shade, I flourish." Thought that was hilarious.
That doesn't make sense.
What? No?
Under the shade, I flourish?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with mahogany, but I caught that because it was really funny.
I thought it was funny because of like plants, they will not flourish in shade.
Indeed. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, that's their national motto. So
cool.
Yeah, there's actually some species that are considered to be mahogany-like enough to be considered mahogany, but there's a lot of debate around that. So those are the non-Swietenia varieties, but
let's remain mahogany purists.
Oh, for sure. I'm such a mahogany snob.
All right,
but
so
the original word is let me see if I can't butcher this. Maganwa is the original word I think that it was taken from.
Oh, I see.
And it was like an African word, and then when slaves were brought over to harvest trees in South America, they saw that variety and they just named it that. So this was actually the name of another African tree as well.
Nice.
So yeah, the seed looks really cool. Have you seen the seed?
I have not.
The seed looks like a maple key with a chiseled jaw.
You
can imagine that.
Hang on, I have to look this up. Mahogany seed?
Mahogany seed, yeah. Do it up. It's really funny. But yeah, while you do that, I would just wanted to mention that there's a lot of information on mahogany that is really dry, historic, economic, political. There's like going through the trades and the economy of which one was popular, and you could look that up if you want, but that's not for me.
Is it like this 5-pronged thing?
No, you're terrible at looking things
What
up.
do you? What am
No,
I looking for?
Don't worry about it. You'll see it later. I'll show you in the privacy of your own home.
Very well.
Anyway, so I'm doing the quiz this week too.
Whoa.
What?
I get to challenge you now.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
So,
Carry on.
This time, I challenge you to learn as much as possible about unusual numbers.
Unusual numbers. Is that like imaginary or
I am not going
rational?
to say any more than that.
All right, well, I guess I got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about that next show. But yeah, so I've got a quiz, and this quiz, it took me a long time to think this up. And I
Is
hope
it
it's
awesome?
okay. It's okay. I'm calling this quiz War of the Woo. Named after War of the Worlds. So what this quiz is I've got 5 different things here. 5 different hoaxes that were astronomy-based hoaxes. A lot of aliens, sadly. There's not a lot of astronomy hoaxes. And these are hoaxes that large portions of people believed at some point. And you're going to have to tell me whether or not I made up this hoax or whether it actually happened.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else, or it's just that?
That's just it. You're going to tell me if it's true or
Okay.
false, basically.
Okay.
If whether it happened or whether there's not so much.
Okay.
All right. Number 1. A reproduction and rebroadcast of War of the Worlds geared towards the Republic of Chad saw a similar response to the original 1938 airing of War of the Worlds. In 2006, mind you.
Jeez.
So is that fake? Did I make that up? Or is that real?
I don't think you're clever enough to think of the Republic of Chad, so
No.
I'm going to say that's real.
No, I made it up!
Oh.
Yes!
Damn it.
Yep.
That's random.
That's really good, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, now you know where we're at. So here's the next one. In 1835, a popular New York newspaper released a series of articles describing highly detailed accounts of a civilization on the moon. The hoax was not discovered for a week, and the newspaper never issued a retraction.
I think I've heard of that before. I think that
yeah?
happened.
So you're saying that's true?
Yeah.
Okay, it is. It's true. Yes.
Yeah, I've heard of that one before.
It's called the Great Moon Hoax. Yeah, the paper was the New York Sun, and many people consider it when that was when the Sun became so popular.
Huh.
There were 6 stories, each a day after the next, and they talked about things like bison, goats, unicorns, bipedal, tailless beavers, and bat-like winged humanoids who built temples, all on the moon. There were trees, oceans, beaches, and these were discovered with the whole story started off. The first story was, there's a great new telescope technology. And that was based on a whole new principle, not even optics. So that was the idea. That was the first story. And then they kept coming out with, oh my God, we found all this crazy stuff on the moon. But
that's so funny.
Yeah.
That's so good.
It's really great. Read up the rest. You don't have a lot of time now, but you should totally read up on it. There's great illustrations and stuff. But yeah. So eventually the authors of this announced that the observations have been terminated because the telescope acted as a lens, turning basically turning the sun into a burning point and burnt down the whole lab. So they can no longer come up with these discoveries.
Damn it.
All right. So number 3. It's a long one. A statement released into a press wire from Palomar Observatory, a privately owned astronomical observatory located in San Diego County, California, in 1978 fooled the press, and because of that, the late great Carl Sagan made a statement about the newly discovered alien spacecraft orbiting Earth. This turned out to be an intentional hoax by a man able to escape the security of the observatory. Retractions were made several days later.
Ooh. Ooh.
Have you heard of this one?
See, no, but I was totally thinking that this could totally be plausible until I heard the Carl Sagan bit.
Yeah? You don't think the Carl Sagan
Because
did
he's
it?
such a skeptical fellow.
Yeah, okay, well this is in 1978.
Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna say it happened.
It didn't. Yes, I got you again.
Oh my gosh. You just made that whole thing up?
Yeah, that's just out of, I just pulled that out of,
Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, you're not just.
Should have gone with my gut.
You should have.
Okay.
All right. Number 4. Red
You make them
colored.
sound way too plausible.
I did. I took a long time with this one. This was a lot of effort I put in.
All right. Sorry, go
All
ahead.
right, number 4. Red-colored rain was seen falling in Kerala, India on September 23rd, 2001. It was identified as a component of an alien contact or invasion.
I think you made that up.
Nope, it's true.
Oh my god.
You're really terrible at this
I'm
quiz.
really bad today.
Yeah, this is called blood rain or red rain. It's been observed several times throughout history. What it is basically a spore of a certain type of algae. And yeah, it's really cool because there's a whole hoax around it. So nobody cared in 2001. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's red rain. Okay, fine." Nobody cared at all. And then in 2006, Godfrey Lewis and Santosh Kumar of Mahatma Gandhi University proposed a controversial argument that these were actually extraterrestrial cells. Thing is, they were actually physicists, and they didn't properly prepare the stains for the cells, so they actually didn't see anything. They thought it was completely crazy and didn't like this. This is nobody's ever seen anything like this before, but it was just they didn't properly prepare the sample.
They didn't think to consult a microbiologist or something?
They were physicists, and they were like, "We can do this." So they assumed that, and they're sticking to it.
Wow.
After being debunked several times.
They're sticking to it?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch associated with the story. A long debunking process, a lot of controversial stuff. Look it up, really interesting. All right, number 5. In 1705, John and Alice McCartney, a Scottish couple, claims to have made contact with creatures from another world. They fool a large portion of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, with their wooden costumes. Only after then, the wife Alice McCartney turned in her own husband for the deception.
Oh, 1705. I think that sounds plausible.
I made it up again!
Oh my gosh.
So you got almost all of them wrong.
Oh, that's brutal. You're good.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're way too good at BSing.
Yeah, well, that's a big portion of being a skeptic, being able to come up with your own crap.
I guess so. Well, good quiz. I wish I'd done better, but good quiz. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, only 5. It took a lot of effort to come up with
no,
these,
that was... I wonder what our viewers got.
I would be interested.
Comment your score.
Yes, leave it in the comments.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's it. That's our show. Make sure to email any comments or questions to Mind the Gap hosts, or leave them in the comments if you're on YouTube. The next show will be called... Do you know what it's called? It's about spontaneous stuff. That's all we know. All right.
Yeah,
cool.
Spontaneous things.
So yeah, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, iTunes, or the podcast feed of your choice, and be sure to like or rate us depending on your platform. Thanks for listening.